sun's out, I love it. It's almost spring-like. I think Wart and Willie actually did see his shadow, so get your bathing suits ready. We're going to be swimming by April. Not likely. Anyways, we're already in open session. Minutes for the previous meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to declare pecuniary interest on a closed matter.
Right. Oh, yeah, okay, that's, so you went, yeah, you've already done that in closed, now you're doing it in open.
Yes, that's
right?
correct.
Any other disclosure and pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Any heard none? Okay. Move to convene in open session. We did already. Moved by Councillor Cole, second by Councillor Elliott, that the minutes of the January 14th, 2014 council minute meeting be approved as circulated. All in favor? Carried. Additional items, this is closed other business. Do you have one? Anybody else?
I'll have one.
Carrie? All right. Moved by Deputy Mayor Fisk, second by Councillor Elliott, the Town of Council Minto convenes into Committee of the Whole. All in favor? Great. Public meeting, we don't have any delegations. We have some delegations today, and we're going to have Mandy and Janet come up and do the first one. Welcome. This is kind of like a summary thing, right?
Hi, so we're here to update on the 4th Annual Mayor's Charity Golf Tournament. It's going to be held this year on Thursday, August the 14th at Pike Lake Golf Center Limited. The application process is now open and will close on Friday, March the 14th for anyone who's looking to enter into that. Applications can be found on the Town of Minto website, and the core committee is looking for applications from nonprofit organizations within the Town of Minto that fit into one of 3 categories, so community betterment, service club, or sports clubs.
Over the last 3 years, the Mayor's Charity Golf Tournament has raised over $24,000 for our community groups. The money raised has gone towards planter baskets, new baseball equipment, and assisting the groups with their financial expenses of running these programs.
And just as this afternoon, we're excited to announce that Triton Engineering will again be sponsoring Beat the Pro, and Grant Service Center will again be the hole-in-one sponsor. So we've got 2 sponsors on board this year. We're pretty excited about that. And if anyone would like more information about the tournament or to obtain the application form, simply call 519-338-2511 or visit our Town of Minto website.
Thanks, Jen. Any questions for? Kind of exciting to hear something's going to happen in the summer.
Yeah.
Last year, my team actually beat the Pro and won the draw, and they cut me out of it.
That's because you didn't think you
I
wanted.
was the only one that didn't make the greens. They said, tough luck. The Pro and I were off the green, so yeah, they got the money and they ran with it. So I'm not having them back. No. Thanks, Phyllis.
Thank you.
Next up, oh no, I don't see Shirley here yet.
Mayor Bridge, Annalene was speaking to me before. I have this sinking feeling like that. I perhaps didn't notify them of the date change.
Well, they'll be here
I'd
tomorrow.
like to think I did, but they may have run into some other conflict. But if it's been me, my apologies, but we'll make sure they're invited back at a subsequent meeting. And they may show up here yet.
Okay, well, we'll just move on with Paul Ziegler.
Somebody should contact them, and we'll make sure they don't show up tomorrow. Okay.
Yes, okay. Paul? You want to go first, or you want to have Peggy? Well, we can let Peggy go first. Sure, Peggy, why don't you go first? Because Paul's got one of those drawn-out things, you know. Not that you know, yours is more concise and to the point, right? Thank you.
I'm here today representing the Great Wellington Theatre Guild, just to let you know of our intent and hope to get your support to install a catwalk into the theater auditorium for the purpose of mounting our current lighting system onto it. I don't know if you've ever been in the theater and you notice that our current lighting bar where it is. Right now we use a 40-foot ladder to go up and change our gels and reposition them and whatnot. So the intent is to install a catwalk. If you're standing on the stage looking towards the lobby, It'll come from the upstairs dressing room, run down the side, about 3/4 of the side of the building, and then across. And then the intent is to take the current lights that are there and install them onto the actual catwalk so that we can use it to change lights and position lights and whatnot. It's mainly a safety issue.
I can believe it.
And it's for the longevity of the guild so that more people are able to do it, because right now we've only got 2 or 3 people that are either able or willing to go up that ladder.
Well, you'd
and
be on a
change
bit of
the
a
light.
slope with that ladder, would you not? Not too bad?
We've got it all engineered and whatnot, so it won't affect
Okay.
the sight lines at all.
No, I mean, no, when you put that 40-foot ladder up, that's pretty scary.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, for sure,
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't get to the top of it. I'd go halfway would be my limit.
yeah. So we actually had, as part of, we were trying to apply for a petroleum grant, so as part of that, we had to get it engineered and get estimates and everything to submit. We were not successful in securing the grant, but we've decided, after the success of our last show, that we're in a financial position to be able to pay for the catwalk ourselves out of our own funds. And we feel that it's important to do for the,
Mhm.
you know, for the health of the guild and the safety of the members and whatnot, so,
Good.
you know, that's basically where we're at. We have everything in place. We were waiting for the building permit, and the contractors are all on board.
Super. Any questions for Peg? Okay.
I'm just wondering, did the Trillium people give you a reason why you weren't accepted, or just said you weren't
No,
accepted?
it's just a generic, you know, like, there's a lot of people looking for funds. I think with the Trillium thing is that it's to benefit as many people as possible in the public.
Mhm.
And as much as, you know, will improve the shows and whatnot, it's, this particular thing is more for us than it is for the general public in a way, so.
Well, I think in the future, if you were planning on applying for a Trillium grant, I'd recommend that you talk to Mark McKenzie. He's the county councillor for this area, and he's written for 2 that I'm aware of, both that were successful.
Yeah,
So-
we've actually received a grant before too, so
Okay.
it was kind of a long shot that we would get one again, because
Okay.
we used
So
a
you-
grant for,
Because I
putting
think
in the
it's-
sound system.
I think
so-
format is really important in how you present it,
Mhm.
and Mark seems to have the knack for that. He's
Okay.
been very successful, so
That's good to know.
he might be a resource person even if there's a chance in the future that you're applying.
Okay, yeah, and Bill was actually very helpful as well with, the
It does
process.
come down, as what you're saying, Peggy, too, in a lot of cases, comes down to, they've got a big
It's,
big
you know,
basket of need, and
Yeah.
sometimes you get it, sometimes you're
yeah, for sure.
not, but, yeah. No, I think it's a great idea, and I don't, has anybody got any other questions? I believe there's been no objections from the building group, or Terry, you're fine, and I think it'll be an add value to the facility, so, all means, and hopefully we're gonna be doing some other work there this year too, so,
Okay,
yeah.
alrighty.
Motion?
Yes.
No, I just wanted to say it might be something you think of applying the mayor's golf tournament for.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh.
There's $3,000.
Okay, thank you.
Suggestion?
Yep, it's up for a run.
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Motion, Mary Lou?
Second it.
Ron? All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Peg, for coming. Okay. We got, now Paul.
Is it true that you elongate things out, or is that?
No, I just see this is his package here with his stuff.
So it's not true?
Pictures. Pictures, we got pictures. Oh, yeah, we locked you in? What's that?
Your partner's touring right now.
It's like the lodge.
Wow, look at his.
I'm spreading right out here, Bill, on you.
Me too.
I'll put it back. Okay.
I'd like to thank Mayor Bridge and Council for allowing us to make a presentation here. First thing is, I had a call this morning from my counterpart who looks after the structural side of this for us. and he was unable to attend today. He was sick, so I'm going to give you a brief overview of the structural part, and I have a presentation, I hope not too long, with regards to the roads portion of it. Just so you're aware, the structural, the OSIM reports for the bridges and culverts was previously presented to staff, and Andrew Burgess, who did this work for us, will make himself available to come up at a future date when he's feeling better. So he was online to be here with me today till about 9 o'clock this morning, and sort of sent me on my own. So anyways, what I'd like to do is just go through the road management plan that we prepared for you, and this is just a brief presentation. It's not, there's more detail in the actual report, but I'd like to just go through a few of the things that we discovered. I'll just start out here. So the purpose and background, the background and purpose of this project was obviously to identify your road system, to create an inventory by taking into account the condition and geometrics and surface types of your existing roads. Now, when I say geometrics, that's width, not necessarily the engineering geometrics that would give you horizontal and vertical sight lines, okay? So that is, wasn't really part of that. We also wanted to identify the needs as far as improvements, and we wanted to provide costs for you for that. The inventory was also done as far as your equipment for maintenance of your roads. We have that in here. I don't touch too much on that through here, but it is in the report. And the other aspect of this report was to provide replacement costs for your asset management, which we provided late last year for Gord to make sure that he got everything he needed for your asset management program, okay? The methodology of this, what we did when we did the inspection on your roads was basically it's a rating of 10 to 0, 10 being good, 5 being just barely acceptable, and 0, well, you have an issue. Actually, 5 and below you have an issue. So 7 is still a good rating for a road, but once it gets down to a rating of 5, then it's you have to start looking at what you're going to do to either rebuild the road or maintain the road, okay? With this, each section of road, and we usually do it by block to block, out in the country as well, is given an inventory sheet, and in that inventory sheet, it's a stack of paper like this. It's each one is it details width, shoulders, whether there's curb, sidewalk, all that information on each section road is provided on those individual sheets.
Just a quick question. We get to a 5 and it's time to fix the road, and we don't have the money, so obviously we can't fix every 5 in the year. Is it gonna cost us more money when it goes to a 4, or more money goes to a 3, and so on, or?
Yep.
So,
Usually once you get down to a 5 or a 4, what happens sometimes, and there's different things that'll affect that. If you have a dead-end street and it's down to a 5 and it's alligatored, it may stay like that for 10 years, basically because there's no traffic. But if you have that same road and you have 1,000 cars a day, it's going to disappear in a year. So there's other factors that, and I'll go through that as we go on.
all right.
But yeah, generally once you get down to a rating of a 5 on a road,
Each year it costs us more to fix it.
that's right. And because at 5, there's still value in that road base. So by adding, say, an inch of asphalt, or you can get more life out of it, say, in a certain situation, or if you leave it, you have to completely redo that road. Okay, so there is that, but there's a lot of different,
Yes,
yeah.
factors.
So this is just a quick summary. Where we say rural up here, that's the former township. Clifford, of course, is self-explanatory, Harrison and Palmerston. So there's your road breakdown. 56 kilometers of gravel roads in the town of Minto, 104 of low-class bituminous, which would be tar and chip, I would describe that as. High-class bituminous would be your asphalt cement roads. There's 82 kilometers. And then we break it down in a couple different ways there. Table 3 actually gives you an idea based on the rural versus the town, what the ratings are. So Palmerston, for example, is an average of 6.7, the roads condition are. Harriston's a little lower, Clifford's a little lower again, and then the township's at 6.9. So it gives you an idea if you want to just look in the different areas. And there's an interesting thing that's happened, and I'll get into that a little later here, with the different municipalities, the former different municipalities, and how they've evolved a little bit. Now I get into my pictures, and I'm just going to go through this real quick. Mike McIsaac and I drove all the road sections in July over, I think, 3 or 4 days, and a lot of these are typical pictures. Okay, so and we took a lot of pictures this time, and Mike is very interested in the pictures because I think he'd like to do this again in 2 years and see how much they have deteriorated. Because roads without a lot of traffic get to a certain stage and they'll stay sort of that level of deterioration. Anyways, this is Park Road up in Clifford, and you can see with the alligatoring, there's been some repair in the center, but this is one of two things. The road base maybe isn't 100% underneath it to support the asphalt, or the asphalt was maybe too thin. And this road section here would probably be a 6. You know, it's still holding together. There's a bit of maintenance on it. You can see some cold patch in the center. Here's another street in Clifford where one side of the street was rebuilt, I believe, for water main replacement, and the other side was left as it was. So you have one good lane and one lane that's basically done. However, that lane, it's alligator and all the pieces have broke up, but it'll probably stay like that for a while. Now, the one thing in Clifford, there isn't a lot of curb, so you have drainage issues too. And any road builder will tell you that one of the most important things with maintaining a road is drainage. So you see on the sides, the lawns, the water sits. Here's down by the arena at Clifford, same thing. You have some alligatoring along the side, the edge isn't protected, and you have drainage issues. This is another thing this was what Mike asked me to put this picture in. These are service cuts. So where a road has been probably not bad, it's either this was a water main break and the repair, it wasn't done very well, and that happens because usually in a break situation you don't have an opportunity to rebuild it to the, to be as homogeneous as it once was.
Paul, would that mainly be because of settling?
Yes, and a lot of times, Terry, that those water mains or breaks are usually done in the wintertime, and they put the material back in, they don't get an opportunity to compact it to the point. And here's another situation. I believe this was a trench as well, and this trench has been fixed with cold patch, and it's just, most of the road's still good, but you have that situation where the repair. Here's one on John Street in Harriston. These are, I suspect, they're water connections. And so that adds to the, the road generally probably be still okay, but it's going to have, its life's going to be jeopardized by patches. This one on John Street, I wasn't sure, but this is a typical, this is probably 3rd, 4th generation of repairs, so I call it becomes a bubblegum road. Repairs on top of the repairs, and it's a maintenance issue, and it's expensive. This is Union Street, obviously, and it's just drainage issues. And with water sitting on your road like that, it doesn't give the base a chance to perform. And this is another drainage issue, but this is an area where there has been some crack sealing completed over the years. And the road, I think the reason I brought this one up is because the road 5 years ago was a 7, and it's still arguably a 6, so it hasn't deteriorated to the point that you might think it would. But it's in a low-traffic area. That's the dead end on King Street. Here's a good example. This one was rated as a 5 years ago. This is Lawrence Street, which is a dead end, and this is where this road was shot 5 years ago. And it's still shot, but it's standing up. Like, it's still a surface. Would you want to put a lot of traffic down this? No, but it's still a sealed surface. I think that's down by the dead end of Lawrence Street. It's not a through road.
Yeah.
Here's one over in Palmerston. It's and the interesting thing you'll see now we're in Palmerston is there's curb. So a lot of the local streets in Harrison and Clifford don't have curb. Palmerston they do, and what you'll find with the pictures and what we found is the edge of the roads are doing considerably. And the point, I guess, is that curbs tend to get cut on construction projects a lot because it's something you can cut, resurface a road, don't upgrade the drainage, don't put curb in, but the longevity of the road is helped by drainage and curb. And these are older streets in Palmerston, and with the curb you can see the edges, even though there is some definite stress on the roads. The only, this is up by the, that's my car, but that's up by the train station there on William Street, and I showed the crossing here, but the road, even though it's been down for a while, and this is a high traffic road in Palmerston, is the edge of the roads with the curb has protected it. And that's just, and it's kind of an interesting thing because it's noticeable between the villages and the former towns.
Hammerson's on the other side of the track. You're still at Palmerston.
Hammerston.
Okay. Now here's just a repair, and this one doesn't show very well, but curb was put in on this street, and you can see where the joint is here. And so the curb and the new asphalt's good, but anyways, that was just, once again, it's holding up the road, and this asphalt's been down for a while. Okay, just briefly out into the township. What we're trying to show here is that's a slope meter, and roads generally are to have 2% grade on them. And this one is in excess of 8 degrees, which would almost put it in a wheelchair ramp. 12-to-1 slope's 8.5% slope. So what I believe happened with a lot of the township roads were the centers were originally built back years ago with good gravel, and over the years to make them wider they used some of the material from the sides, and it's very typical. So you'll notice that township roads, the center core is very good shape and seems to be holding up, but your outsides are dropping, and that's what's here. This is fourth line. You can see the center core of the road still in good shape, and you can't really see the slope here, but there is significant slope on these roads. Now I think this was pulverized and
We pulverized it in the fall and widened, like,
yeah.
brought it back to its original length, width, and then
Here's third line. Now this is the other side going
Right.
towards White's Road. Same thing. This one's almost 10%. That's a bad picture. Apologize for that. And it's the same thing. You're losing your sides where the core of it, most of your tar chip are pretty decent, but it's your outside that you're losing.
Paul, in the study, I think these were tagged as the worst ones out in the country.
Yes. Third and fourth line were.
Third and fourth line were number one priorities, I think.
Yep.
Done one.
Yes. And that's third line as well, and that one really shows that the center. There's other places too where the angle repose off the shoulder of the roads is just too steep for, they're like a 1-to-1 slope, and generally over time that'll be a problem. So the recommended program, this is all based on year of need. So We actually did it over a 6-year study because we started this project in 2013. So we actually, our first year is going to be 2014. By the time you sort of got up to speed, we're already a year down. So we felt that we would make it a 6-year. So 2014 would be sort of your catch-up year. And basically, we identified over the next 5 years the sections that need to be looked at based on the rating. And we come up with a year of need when something should be done with them, and we put cost to those. We prepared benchmark cost estimates for all these sections of roads, which are all in the report. They're probably in the really small, I can barely see them, but they're...
Yeah, the little tiny print.
Yeah. But anyways, they're all in there in the report. So we went through and we came up with all the different scenarios, and this is more of a tool for Mike and present with you guys, and give you guys an idea what costs are per kilometer. I can go through these if you like, or probably they're somewhat self-explanatory. Right down to concrete sidewalk, we have a kilometer price for concrete sidewalk. As part of the roads need study in the past, we identified sidewalks on each in the urban areas, and we did a rating for them as well as we were going by. So we added that in as well. But these are all your different scenarios, right down from one rural hot lift resurfacing, one pass is 110,000 a kilometer, right down to your full urban reconstruction with 2 lifts of asphalt cement is 780, and that includes your new granulars, cost for storm improvements, drainage, all that. So there's quite a range of improvements. And here's just an example from the tables that we have. The full tables are in the report, but for example, you have Creek Road, which is up by Clifford. In 2013, we rated it as a 5, and so you can see we highlighted it to say that that's the year of need for that section, okay? It's already a 5. And with the low-class bituminous, every year it goes down 0.7. And this is where, Ron, your question comes in. You have to take that with a grain of salt, because we had 5s that, you know, arguably if you followed that method, would now be down to 0s 5 years ago, but they're still all 5 because there's no traffic.
Okay.
So you have to take that all into consideration. So just as a general rating for low-class bituminous, which is a tar chip road, they decrease by 0.7 a year.
How do you, is there a formula that you can put traffic to road wear? Or somehow doing
I
that?
wish there was one.
So you just have to inspect it every year?
I think you
kind of?
do. I really do. I think you use this as a tool to look at road sections, and I've talked to Mike about that. And then you take and you look at those sections and say, okay, well, no, that's not realistic in this case. In a lot of these cases, if Creek Road was 1,000 cars a day, it would be doing that.
Yeah, so you'd know.
But it's less than 400 a day, so it's probably going to stand up a little better. And with high-class bituminous asphalt, we only 0.4 is the average that we take them down a year. So there's the argument that tar and chip road, its value decreases more than an asphalt road, okay? And now we didn't rate the gravel roads, because gravel roads are basically a maintenance issue anyways. Like you count on 2 inches of asphalt a year graded up, and they're usually good.
Now, Paul, I know in our budget this year, the roads department put some traffic study, like an actual counts and stuff.
Oh, for volume traffic
implementation,
volumes.
traffic counts.
Yep.
The only problem we have with it, in my mind, is it doesn't tell you what's going over them. Like, are you getting big trucks, or are you getting
Yeah.
cars, or, but it would at least help, right? If you knew that, and that's maybe what Ron, or you were thinking, Ron, like if you knew that's 500 cars a day going over that one instead of 100.
Yep.
you know, we have to start trying to figure out where our priorities are, even though a road might be worse off than another road, but what you're saying is that other road, if it's 1,000 cars a day, it's gonna deteriorate really quickly. And obviously, it's a road that's being used a lot, so you might have to do some adjustments.
And that's what you have, yeah, and that's probably where Mike's coming from by wanting to get some traffic volumes. Because a lot of the information that we put in here, obviously, we don't have traffic counts on every
Right.
road in Harrison or Palmerston or Clifford, so we've made some assumptions. But there are some specific ones that you can keep an eye on. Squirrel Road 7 is a good example in the township. It's a road that over the years probably has increased significantly in volume. When it was gravel, I don't think it was used as much, but now that it's almost like a little bit of a bypass. People heading from, say, Clifford or up that way towards Listowel. Squirrel Road 7 is
On the tape.
Yep, and you can tell, as a surface treated road, it's not standing up as well as other roads that don't get the traffic. And then we just did, there's another table, which is basically if you do the upgrades in the year of need that was identified, it just updates the road section and shows you when you're gonna have to do that again.
Right.
Okay? This is the part that you won't wanna hear, but anyways, in our 5-year program, we evaluated the road work that is needed to maintain what you have right now, not an upgrade, to maintain. So that's no new curb, no road base improvements, no storm sewer, just to maintain what you have. We came up at 9.4 million over the next 5 years.
6 years. Over 6 years or 5 years?
Or 6 years, sorry.
It
Sorry,
doesn't matter.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. 6 years, sorry. That's why we added the extra year in, actually. But anyways, which is about 1.5 million a year to maintain your existing road system. Now, I don't think this is anything you weren't aware of, and I thought most municipalities are dealing with the same thing. Is that, you know, there's more need than money, so. That's our disclaimer at the bottom there, that should be noted that the proposed improvement type allows for full rehabilitation, but does not include upgrading, and that's just what I went through. So basically, we're putting back, yeah, okay? This is just a little, this is the numbers that we use for the asset management. We gave Gord these costs per kilometer to put in value, and that's what that's for. And here's 3 projects that we identified. Third line from Wellington Road 5 to Wellington Road 109 is in poor shape, and it's so steep in some of the spots, it's almost a hazard, like if you drove off the road. And fourth line you've already dealt with. You've put it back to, pulverized it and put it back to gravel for right now, trying to secure up the base, which is what was recommended. We have George Street in here, and there's probably other streets that you could replace in here as well, okay? But I use George Street, and I think one thing that's your staff is working towards really well right now is they're trying to coordinate infrastructure projects with roads needs, because they're 2 different things. And George Street, for example, has a 4-inch cast iron water main, so it would be a bad idea to obviously rebuild this road, then in 5 years to come along and put a new water main down there. And I think that's key for what you know, that they're recognizing, okay, we have these roads that need to be done, but wait a second, before we decide to do that road, what's the sanitary sewer like under there? What's the water main like? And those improvements should be made before your roads are. And I know it sounds pretty simple, but you'd be surprised how many times.
How hard it is.
Yeah.
And I guess going back to what you talked about before too, is when you have to do a cut in a road, it deteriorates the time value of that road. So
Absolutely.
you can see it in your pictures there, where you've had to unfortunately do some water work or whatever, and now you've got a patch there. You might have a brand new.
Exactly. Or you have half a new road,
Yeah.
and you have half an old road.
Right.
Yeah. So there's just some projects that we put to, there's others, obviously. Oh, sorry.
Okay, So we're talking about when we do streets like that, for example, George Street, and you're suggesting that the road would stand up more if we put a curb, which is proved out in Palmerston, you see that. If we're doing George Street, would we better to put a curb in at a higher cost? Would the road last that much longer than us dealing with the road without a curb? And then how much longer would we have, is what I'm trying to say. So in 5 years, do we have to redo the road without a curb? And does it last 10 years, or is there a saving, really?
I think with a curb, and I have this experience, Fergus and Laura were very similar. Fergus always rebuilt roads and put curb in. Laura didn't. They just would pave back. And they were getting on average 5 to 7 years, I think, longer life out of a curbed road. And the other thing about curb is, usually, you get more than one asphalt out of a curb. So the next time you come back to resurface that road in, say, 15 to 20 years, or even longer, 25 years, that curb stays. And then you remove the asphalt and put new asphalt in, or sometimes you just grind off the top, and it gives you that stability, where you usually don't have that same luxury with a road without curb. But I understand too that, you know, the curb adds significant cost, and sometimes that's not in the budget, so.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's good. No, it's a good question. And that's the balancing act we're in right now, is, as you can see from our, and that's just on our roads, and we haven't gone to the bridges yet.
No.
No, but, you know, we have to get certain ones done, and, sometimes maybe it'd be nice to have all the money you need, and have the other two levels of government give us some of that money back that people have given to them, and gas tax and all the other things, and give it back to us to do our infrastructure. And that's the hope we're gonna keep fighting. And I know you probably hear this to other municipalities too.
Yep.
And so hopefully we can maybe get them to start coming up with some of the dollars, so we can do it, more of it, and get it done, with what we can do on a tax base, based on a property tax base, which is very difficult.
I work for another municipality that's very similar to this one in size, and I won't say who it is, but they elected years ago not to spend as much money on surface treatment in their township roads and whatnot. And they're very similar to this township, and I know last year they spent between $500,000 and $600,000 on maintenance gravel and calcium on gravel roads. So I think that the roads in the town of Minto aren't as bad as I thought they might be when we started this project. Your average, it's pretty decent, actually.
I was happier when I saw it too, and by the way, all the
There's
councillors-
challenges.
There's challenges in there, but it's laid out nicely in the books and the reports from the top 10 problems, and I think it's something we have to go forward with.
Yep.
As far as, and it's gonna be one of those things where we're gonna have to look at it as the overall picture, rather than just, you know, in the past, we might have, you know, get some people worried about, well, we got potholes of this road, let's fix it. But we have to maybe look at it as an overall thing, and where our strategies are on roads. But that's something the public's gonna have to get involved back with us, because we won't, you know, we can't do it. Like, we could raise the taxes 20%, we wouldn't have enough, if you look at those numbers. If you wanted to redo a 1 kilometer of town road, $780,000, everybody in this council knows that's how much, well, how many percent would that be? We're at 40, we're looking at 20%.
40, yeah.
20%, nobody would let you, that's impossible.
And that's 1 kilometer of road.
That's 1 kilometer of road, right? So it's not done on property tax base, it has to be done with other things.
And the conclusion here, I think we've talked about this, but it's basically, it needs to be a living document where it's a tool. Mike McIsaac can use this to identify, gets him in the ballpark, and then he has to use some judgment and maybe review those sections of roads. And we did a very, pretty extensive photo album, like, there was a lot more pictures.
Yeah.
We took a lot of pictures, and I think that's gonna be what really tells you, is you can actually physically see in another 5 years what rate, and come up with a better rate of deterioration.
Go ahead, Ron.
The numbers for traveling on roads, was that just a guesstimate, or do you have actual, for?
Traffic
traffic?
volumes?
Yeah.
We have some,
Okay,
and,
so-
and a lot of them, we did by gosh and by golly, like.
One road's very similar to the other, and it's the same amount of traffic kind of thing.
And there's segments, so, like 0 to 400's your low end for traffic volume, and then it's 400 to 1,000, and then you get up into your higher rates. So there's different, ratings for traffic, and Mike, did have some. A lot of them were from, side roads, from traffic studies that were done on your highways and your county roads.
So if we get a new business in the country, which we have had a couple of new businesses, that'll increase the count somewhat?
Oh, I don't doubt it, yeah.
I think that's why we want to put in budget, Ron, and why we did, is to have traffic counts, do more of them.
Yeah.
Just so we have better information in order to make,
For
build a
sure.
better, overall.
I think you have
project.
some, county does quite a few.
County does a few too, which we can get.
Up here.
Yep. Larry?
Through you, Mayor Bridge, Paul, you made a comment there about an example of a municipality and the upkeep or management of the roads requiring calcium and gravel.
Yes.
So it would be your opinion that roads are better tar and chipped or asphalted compared to being kept in gravel?
I would think that there's definitely an argument that the money that you spend in maintenance, it's not as simple as putting roads back to gravel, because your maintenance costs are gonna, not to mention your equipment costs. That municipality, I'm talking about here,
Yep.
a very similar sized municipality, mostly gravel roads. They run 3 graders full-time, okay, so there's labor, equipment. I think Minto runs 1 grader
Summer.
in the summer for what, 3 weeks?
Not a lot.
4 weeks, not a lot. So they have replacement costs for 3 graders, which are very expensive, but I'm not sure what a grader's worth, 400,000? Am I low on that?
Below.
400.
Is it 400?
I
Oh,
know
you got it
they're
right in
that-
there. Oh, you're cheating, you're looking at the book.
Yeah, I know they're in that range.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they calcium all the roads, and they put 2 inches, they have 2 inches of maintenance gravel for every road. They have boiled, I know we have, up this way too, that you have issues with, frost boils here and there, but theirs is significant in those costs. So it's not as simple as saying, okay, well, we're gonna put roads back to gravel, because you're gonna have increased
Yep.
costs with that. And so there is a balance there too. Now, with that being said, you still have quite a few gravel roads here, but they're usually in appropriate spots where you don't have a lot of traffic right
Low
now.
traffic.
And basically, what's dictated surface treatment is probably traffic over the years.
So if a road has excessive traffic, is it mandatory that it be asphalt or tar and chip, or is that entirely up to the municipality or your public works department?
It's up to you. What happens, what happens is sometimes when you upgrade a road, you create.
Yes. I think Ayton Road's a perfect example.
So you upgrade a road, it doesn't take long for people to start using that road, or they never used that road
Yeah.
before. I grew up outside of town on School Road 7, it wasn't called that then, but that road hardly ever seen any traffic through the Greenbush section there. And it's a major bypass, and right through the Listwell.
Sure. Especially in the summertime.
Yeah, so, sometimes when you improve a road, you also increase the traffic volumes too, so.
Thank you.
What type of, input is like the type of traffic? Is it 50%? Like if you had 400 cars versus 400 trucks and heavy farm equipment?
Heavy,
It would-
heavy truck traffic would be 15%, 20% of the vehicles that are trucks, like probably Highway, 109 would be 15 to 20% trucks.
In the fifth line, probably.
Yeah. And what about heavy farm equipment?
Actually, we've
Probably
been
not.
building some roundabouts, so I've learned a lot about farm equipment going through roundabouts and, the weight of the track. And because of the size of their tires, they don't, put the weight per
No,
square inch.
They're built to go on the.
Not like a truck. Your
Okay.
trucks are still your,
Just wanted to let it
Oh,
be
that's
known
nice
that,
to know.
in case somebody hears this, we're not anticipating any roundabouts and into it. Because I don't want to get my phone ringing off the hook tomorrow. Thanks for that.
Right in the middle of Harrison.
But that's good to know. I didn't realize that was.
Down by the
Well,
L1.
if you look at a combine, for example, you look at the size of the tires.
Yeah. Yeah, I can, because they go on the surface, you know, and
Yeah.
they go out in the fields and stuff. so.
Where a truck trailer tire is, so your pounds per square inch
Yeah.
are, it's
Okay.
concentrated, definitely.
Yep.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah.
yes.
Well, they're hard on the roads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and because they're very thin, yeah.
Right.
Anyways, it's great to get all this information, and I think we, you know, from 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when this council first came on board, we didn't have this kind of detail, and it's, you know, I mean, it was hard, I'm sure, for Public Works at the time to even, I remember the first few discussions about roads. Now I feel we'll be more comfortable going forward and trying to come up with an overall plan, because we've got these studies, and we've got the asset management, we know what we have to try to put away. So from a budgeting standpoint and from a need standpoint, and trying to put all the pieces together, I know Mike and Brian will be working at that. I feel more confident that we can come up with some good strategies going forward, this council for next year, and then future councils, I'll have that. So, thanks very much, Paul, for, I guess, Mark?
Well, I was gonna give you a quick overview of
Oh,
the-
yeah, that's fine, of the book.
bridges.
Yep, bridges?
If-
Oh, you're gonna do the bridges today, okay. I
Well, I'll
wasn't
give you a
sure.
quick overview because,
Way
Yeah.
too late.
Yeah, you wanna really be
I
depressed.
don't know if you guys, council has seen these, okay? But real quick, now, we didn't produce a copy for everybody because obviously there's trees. But generally, a lot of trees involved here. But generally, each tab represents a structure.
Yep.
And Andrew Burgess, on behalf of the town, inspected each structure individually, and he completed a NOSIM inspection report on this, which is based on the Ontario Structural Inspection Manual, okay, which is guidelines for the province. So each structure is broke down into its different elements, whether it's deck, guardrails, abutments, whatever. And so he's gone through all your structures, and each one's laid out in detail. And with that information, he comes up with a bridge PCI, Bridge Condition Index, which basically is a rating, just like our roads, okay? And so on each one, what you need to know about these documents, at the very end of the second input, report, in here, he provides
It's perfect.
He provides the worst structures in rating, right from a 25, which is right up to an 88. And he tells you how many years are left in that bridge structure. For example, this one on the third line, 0 years left. So
Yeah,
I want you to
yeah.
attend to that one right away.
Probably true.
Most of these are 30 to 40 years out, okay? Also in here, he's provided a replacement priority, which obviously that one I just mentioned is number 1. Another thing he breaks out in here for Mike and Brian is he gives you the rehabilitation needs. So he's laid out costs and what you should be looking at on these structures. And of course, it's money and budgets too, okay? So that's maintenance as well. And then he has, and I'm not gonna get into this because I don't know enough about it, but he has financial planning and basically a cost-benefit analysis, okay?
Right.
And that's all in these reports here. And at another time, I can get Andrew back to.
Yep. And then we use those reports, I believe, Gord, for your asset management.
Yeah, that's correct. All of those reports, not all of them, but sample summary and all the priorities are actually part of the asset management plan that we adopted in December 17th.
So there's a great deal of information here. So
It's available for the council to look at, and we'll probably be getting some breakdowns of it. But I like the way it's laid out.
yeah,
You
so
don't have to go through the whole thing to find what your high needs are.
so if you have someone phone up and ask a question, and
Yep.
you can go to the map at the back of this report, Ron,
Yep.
pick out your structure,
Yep.
Okay.
and tell them that that's a Normandy.
Good
What are
luck.
you doing
For the
that
last 40 years.
Yes, Ron?
Just, are there any bridges that he feels that would be closed down if we don't attend to them right away?
That one.
Just one,
And how close is that to being
right away.
Yeah.
right away?
Yeah.
So So what would determine that, it's not, obviously not closed yet, is it?
No,
It's half load.
So-
it's half load.
So what would determine closing it?
Well, what you normally do in those situations, you would get someone like a structural engineer like Andrew to do, every 2 months, to do an inspection, just come up and have a look at it. And it might be, he'll get a better feel with what, because he's done these inspections on one visit. So after 2 or 3 visits to that structure, he might say, well, no, there is, you know, the abutment's pulling away from whatever, and say, we need to close it.
Shut it down. Okay.
So,
That particular bridge is in our budget for this
Yep.
year. We had.
Okay, that's what I was gonna
We
ask,
went
what-
in,
Yep.
Ron, that's the one on the third line that we went in for the
Oh,
grant.
right,
For the grant.
Yeah, the culvert.
yeah.
and that,
So hopefully.
I got
touch
out
wood,
and
we
walked
get that.
across, so.
And I'll take everything back, what I said about the governments and everything, if they give us that money, like, for that one.
yeah, you were one of the few that got.
Yeah, we haven't got it yet.
No check.
But we got to the second stage.
Checks in the
We're still
mail.
in the race, we're still in the race.
Mayor Bridge, very briefly, just on page 18 of the report that
Oh, this
Paul
report.
gave you.
Yep.
He mentioned it in his presentation, but there is at the beginning of a replacement schedule for public works. I wanted to point your attention to that, and the expenditure that they're estimating there based on certain vehicle certain period of time for each vehicle type is about $378,000 a year to do vehicle replacement, so. In addition to the 1.5 million on roads, and I think the bridge and culvert one was around 600 and some thousand annually, so altogether there, you're looking around 2.5 million.
Off a $4 million budget.
For your roads, vehicles, some of which can be attributed to water and sewer, and then also the culvert. So we've got a long way to go in that area in terms of budgeting for the future. But I wanted to point your attention to that because it's been something that council's been talking about, is we need that vehicle maintenance plan in place too.
And can I just ask, the replacement year, is that based on economics or is it based on need? Like, is it that this is when we get the best trade-in value for that vehicle versus
Yeah.
when we actually need to replace it?
There are guidelines on vehicles, and we used this manual. And basically, it says that I think a grader every 7 years, or a vehicle this is the optimum time to move it. And you have to use it sort of like you have to take that with a grain of salt as well. But possibly you could get more money.
And
You're
some of the
not-
miles you'll be putting on them and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You'll have certain vehicles, you could buy 3 vehicles this year, and they'll deteriorate at different rates based on what they're being used for. Same with your graders. Other municipalities might wear out a grader in 6, 7 years easy, where if you're only using a grader in the winter, and
A bit in the summer.
it's gonna last you longer. So that's all done on averages.
So there is some give and take
Oh, yeah,
in the
absolutely.
year as well, okay.
Anything else for Paul? Thanks, Paul. Great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Lots of information.
Maybe not good, but interesting.
That was interesting. All right. Public question period. Do we have any? Yes, Randy. He's on board already. Correspondence received for information requiring direction of council. Anything there that, oh, yeah, I've got yours too. You were wondering about this one? Yeah, I had that kind of. Did you want to speak to that?
Sure, well, yeah, there's a couple.
Yeah.
One of them deals with appointment for Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, I guess, I don't.
It's in our thing, appointment bylaw, right?
Mayor Bridge, through you, we have graciously included you as the appointment for both conservation authorities in our appointment bylaw.
Okay.
I did contact Wellington North, and I think they're satisfied with you.
I'm
taking
actually
on.
supposed to attend a meeting with both general managers, hopefully next week. The other thing is, I found it quite interesting, the reading of the North Perth resolution regarding the Rubus wind project. Now, they mention us as being affected by it. I'm not sure where this project is. Do we have an idea where it is and how it affects Minto? Something about we cover that area for fire, is that, are you familiar with this? No.
And I'm wondering, I'm wondering too, would there be a concern over the airport again on this one? Is it close
Mayor
enough?
Bridge, what I can do is if that's a piece of correspondence you'd like to come back in the open
Mhm.
council agenda with a staff report in terms of Minto impacts, and maybe we just need a motion to that effect. It could well have some impacts. I looked at it, but I couldn't tell you exactly the location.
No, I have no
It's quite
idea.
lengthy, the report.
They had a map in it, but it was a map of Port Elgin
Yeah,
and
but
the
showing the circle,
CAW, yes.
yeah, made no sense to me. I wouldn't looked at that.
We need a map, I think that would be very helpful in deciding where it is and how it impacts us.
If you want, we can bring a report back next meeting on it. We had a motion to accept the correspondence and bring back a report on that one, or any others that.
And I just have one other, if I may. Randy Pettipies asked us maybe to present a resolution on joint and several liability, and we've met with the minister in the past, so I think we should be supporting that or issuing a resolution or whatever the request is.
Yeah.
We'll bring both those back then.
It's quite interesting, Randy's note that, and that 38 states, United States, 38, I think, believe that they do have some kind of limited liability. And I thought there was a few provinces, he didn't say anything in there about
I
provinces.
think Saskatchewan has.
That's Saskatchewan, I thought, I was thinking Alberta, but I might be wrong, but a couple of them out west have done it as well. So anytime we can sort of support that and keep that in the, up there, I think is important, because we're talking about insurance today, and a lot of what the insurance companies, they can't do much about it, and if this joint liability is still there, that's been a big driver of our costs. Definitely support that.
So make the motion, we bring those both forward, meeting with more information.
And I guess the other thing, I was happy to see that Randy's supporting us on the Ontario Disaster Relief Assistance Program. We're back in there, as you've seen from your report, we've got a major cost over the 2 ice storms that we had, so hopefully that will add some support, so. It's always nice when you're a member of the legislature is actually very involved. Motion, second, Ron? Lou, all in favor? Got those? Good. And the other correspondence, I don't think there's, no, that's it, okay. Reports of committees. And I have, is Mandy coming up for that? Yeah. Doing this one? I'll talk a bit on this as well. Mandy?
So I'll let you discuss the Wellington County, if that's,
Sorry?
I'll let you discuss the Wellington County Municipal
Yep,
Economic.
Yeah. Want me to do that right now?
Sure.
Okay. I just thought I'd bring, for the economic development for the county level, this time around, I asked the staff to provide these for the county councilors, and I thought it'd be good for you guys to have, and I don't know if you've got any questions in those, if you had a chance to read them, but that's sort of what went on last year in both the taste reel and the county economic development, what happened in 2013, so there's just a little information there. So if anybody's got any questions on those, just a little update on the BRNE. Are you doing the BRNE, or you want me to do that? BRNE is going smoothly. We have 257 interviews done to date, 8 municipalities working together on this. I'm really proud of this because this project is a kind of a rare one. It's never been done before in the province, so we're the first ones to do that many municipalities all at once. So we can be very proud of that. First quarter is busy, and the next step will be analyze all the data and prepare the comprehensive report with recommendations, which you'll have a chance to get to see. All employers and partners will be invited to an end of project celebration this spring. And this is actually on I got the date on this.
I don't know, I'm not sure if they've set the date for the final one, but they are planning to come back to council on April 15th.
April 15th,
Yes.
okay, that was what, April 15th, so that's good. And then one other thing that we did, and I don't know if I mentioned it at this council, but we did a live and work in Wellington free bus tour for people outside the community looking for job opportunities. And the bus was full. We had 4 employers open their doors. One of the employers was Royal Terrace. And out of those 21 people that were on the bus, they were all ready to, they were new immigrants and new people to Canada and our area. And they were pretty impressed. And there was actually 3 hires out of that 21. 100% would like to do it again, so, and other employers have been asking us now to be involved in that, so that's kind of neat. And then I also have a workforce strategy, and I have copies of the workforce strategy plan that just came out as well. And I think we had a little update for the middle section, but this is from the county level. And one other thing that's happening right now is the 6th annual Source for Here event, which it's kind of a neat, it's a Taste Real event where the customers actually come, am I right on this one? No, this was the, no, sorry, this is the one where customers come from all over and they check our skilled people and have food, and that's on the February 24th. Most of us, unfortunately, will be down at Good Roads. Creates a platform for farmers and chefs and retail processors, distributors, and local food organizations to make the right connection. So what happens is we get suppliers come to a restaurant, the restaurant people being there, and they can say, well, you know, we need so much lettuce over the year. So they'll actually buy the product right there and say, we're going to now have, you're going to be our supplier for lettuce, you're going to be a supplier for potatoes or whatever, so they know in June they need this much, so that the farmer can actually plant that much because they got contracts. So it's kind of a nice thing, and over 100 people come to that. It's been a real success. And they have Dr. Owen Roberts, who's the urban cowboy, is going to be the guest speaker. So that's about it for me.
One other very exciting thing was the County Economic Development Committee passed their, or the county had passed their budget, so
Yes,
now.
oh yes.
There's $175,000 for all of the municipalities to apply for, so the town of Minto is looking to apply for up to $25,000 of that funding to use towards our economic development initiatives, so something that we're very excited about. Yeah. So the minutes from the Economic Development and Planning Committee from January 9th, we discussed what we would like to see happen in the year of 2014. Some of the items that were brought forward were continue to do our bi-monthly business and corporate calls, continue to support the business incubator, plan for the 2015 Big Dig, continue to support new business and family growth, communication with businesses, capitalize on the 2016 International Plowing Match with local businesses, promote youth entrepreneurship and connect with local schools, support the community gardens initiatives, and explore the possibility of an agricultural park in the 55 acres of industrial land in the Harriston Industrial Park. The Business Development Coordinator position was advertised in the Minto Express, Wellington Advertiser, Town of Minto social media outlets, Town of Minto and Minto Chamber of Commerce websites, as well as it was sent out in an email blast to Chamber of Commerce members. And Mayor Bridge, if you'd like to give an update on that.
We were able to have actually 5 interviews, I believe, and 6 interviews altogether, that's right. We had 5 one day and 1 another day. And some really good candidates, and it was a tough choice, but we were able to secure the services of Krista Ross,
Carissa
Ross, I haven't got it right in front. Krista Ross, and she has a background with the town. She worked for the chamber one summer, I believe you know her, Mary Lou.
Yes, I do.
She's daughter of Gary and Wendy Ross, and she's got her degree in Parks and Rec, and she's been working at some recreational facilities. So a lot of enthusiasm, and we're going to introduce her tonight to the chamber because, as you know, it's a shared role. So she's going to be on board on February the 18th. So that's the scoop. We got the scoop before the chamber gets it. We happen to be meeting ahead of them today. So we're really happy.
CAO White reported that he and Joe McLaughlin met to discuss the purchase of existing furniture, and the leasehold improvements will remain with the building, and that an updated lease agreement, including improvements to the windows and the addition of the insulation in the building, was sent back to the owner. The lease agreement begins on March 1st, with access to the property beginning, or granted 1 month early. And as for the committee, the board of directors, that'll be later in the appointment bylaw as well. The Big Dig will be taking place in Harriston in 2015. We are currently waiting to hear from our engineers that we could invite them to our next Economic Development and Planning Committee meeting. The committee agreed that it would be good to meet with the engineering consultant as soon as possible and that a public open house is the best option for addressing any potential issues in regards to the Big Dig. And as Mayor Bridge mentioned, the business retention and expansion project is now complete. We are just aggregating the data. We're going to have a retreat on February 20th to go over the preliminary results. And Carolyn O'Donnell and Yana Reichert from the county will present their final results to council on April 15th. The annual general meeting for the Minto Chamber of Commerce is tonight at 7 o'clock at the Harriston train station, and all are welcome to come. And they've also purchased new billboards from Rainbow Signs, and they will be at the corners of 23 and at 109 as well. Mayor Bridge reported that the new electric sign is now up at the Wellington County Library, the Harriston branch. And Councillor Caldwell wanted to congratulate Brian Hanson, Director of Public Works, and staff for their hard work during the ice and snowstorms. The amount of time and dedication the staff contributed showed great dedication.
Questions?
Just a comment on the sign, as it is now available for advertising. I see the Basement Cafe is on there and some other things. So I believe we go through the town office, and well, you guys go direct because you're tenants. But if anybody wants to do something, comes through the town office, and then the town will then go back to the library, and they can do it on a computer. So it's bright, it looks good, and hopefully we can use it.
I've just heard from two people, and it's a silly thing, and I said with the amount of snow in our area.
Yeah, we should
The one side you can't read because of the snow, but.
Yeah, I thought of that the other day too, because I was looking around to see what the date was, but yeah, so maybe we'll have to do some shoveling. Oh, it's gonna melt, right? It's gonna melt.
Eventually, hopefully, but.
And I just want to say that Mandy and Bill, we ended up getting the highest number of surveys for the Arnie and all the communities, I believe. And that was a great tribute to yourself and to Bill. At 47? 45, well, almost 47. It's tough to do, and we did really well, so.
Mayor Bridge, I only did 10 of those, so.
Okay, yeah, Mandy did a lot of them. I was waiting for you to say that. Yeah, Ron?
I have two questions.
Yep.
And, agricultural park,
Mhm.
55 acre. What are you going to do there?
What we were doing was throwing out ideas there. It is just an idea. The 55 acres that's in Harriston, we had leased out to a farmer, and he had some issues with waterfowl last year, so we have to come up with an alternative there. And so I'm gonna bring back a report to committee to see whether this idea has any legs at all, but it basically would be leasing small acreages of farm land to new farmers or interested young farmers to try and develop their craft and get leg up and get started. So whether this is something viable or not, we don't know, but that's what it's about.
Now, this might be dumb, and maybe I should know. What's the Big Dig? I don't even-
When we dig up the main street, so
okay.
how it'll impact the businesses.
That's what we're calling
It's-
the Big Dig.
Yeah.
It's right from Max Milk to the lights, is that correct?
Yeah.
Of the area?
All right.
Yeah.
No, I
So
didn't
we
feel
want to
like
get
it,
ahead, yeah, so we're just saying in economic development, we want to get ahead of the issue because we want to make sure everybody gets input.
The Big
How it's
Dig
gonna
is
be
a
done.
polite way of saying it, right?
Yeah, just a term we use.
Okay. Thanks.
One of those Wellington County minutes are for receipt, and so we would need a motion on those. And the town economic development ones are for approval.
Okay, so motion for the county ones, Terry and Mary Lou, all in favor? And then for the approval, we'll,
Start over here.
Terry, all in favor? Boy, this is going a lot faster, it's a lot quieter over on your side, I must say. It's a lot
Then
quieter
you,
over there.
you know who the problem is, then.
It must be, Ron, there you go, there you go. Okay,
Mayor Bridge, we're on to the municipal insurance
Right.
matter. While our consultant is coming up to the table there, just in terms of the final premium for JLT, And if you look at your report on page 2,
Yep.
premiums listed as 227,953 up at the top in the chart. That actual premium with adjustments for, there's a vehicle and so forth, is 229,077. So if you wanted to write that figure in there on page 2 of the report, JLT is 229,077. And then down on page 3 where it says, second paragraph, the most attractive part of the JLT bid is that it's 27,759 lower than Cowan. It's actually about 26,500. And then finally, in the financial considerations, you would put JLT submission is for 229,077. So the lowest price premium in the second sentence is about 19,500 less than than in 2013.
Okay. So those corrections.
Mayor Bridge, Mr. Bushy, we can introduce him later, but very briefly, just in terms of the background, we've come a long way to get to this point. Going back to the renewal actually in 2012 and then in 2013, where you said you would want to look possibly at going out to proposal on this. Back in July, we brought you a report saying, if you are going to go to proposal, here's how we suggest it happen. We brought back some estimates on consulting work, and Mr. Bushy was the most attractive consultant from the price and expertise perspective, and back in August, he was engaged to help us out. First off the bat, though, we had some information to come from the local brokers, because we had passed in our resolution back in October a statement that we would tender carrier and local broker services together. And the local brokers spoke to you. They had an information session that some of you attended, and the end result was that you gave direction that we proceed to proposal on our municipal carrier and local broker services back in October. Mr. Bushy and I worked, and the treasurer, Mr. Duff, worked on the RFP back through to December 11th, and we sent that out to the 4 carriers that we knew of back then. It was also posted on our website. There aren't a lot of carriers, so they were fairly easy to identify, and Mr. Bushy was helpful in getting key contacts with each of those firms. We received on January, we did do some minor addendums to the proposal as we went through, and we actually extended the date for a week to give them all additional time to submit. We received 2 bids, the first from the Frank Cowan Company, and the second from Jardine Lloyd Thompson, or JLT. We did not receive bids from BFL and Omex. Omex was unlikely to bid. They tend not to deal with local brokers, and they're a reciprocal insurance carrier, and as council suggested, they were concerned with that kind of approach. The BFL did not submit, although they did inquire about the bid, and we did give them some information. They chose at the end to not bid. And last but not least, there's a scoring criteria that both Mr. Bushy and I went through in terms of rating the 2 proposals that we did receive. That was outlined clearly in the RFP when it was sent out. And here we sit with a summary of the 2 bids, and Mr. Bushy, being the expert, can go through those with you in a very candid and plain language explanation of all the policies and implications of the various coverages. So it was very helpful that he was able to come today.
Great. Okay. Did you want, what are you gonna have?
I felt like maybe the most important thing would be to look at the chart
Yep.
at the top of page 2, and also the additional coverages that Mr. Bushy's been through, so he can explain the differences in each of those sections and answer any questions.
Well, Mayor Bridge, the process that we went through was to construct our RFP so that when we got the proposals in, we were as close as possible comparing apples with apples. But in the insurance industry, that really doesn't happen anymore. There was a time very early in my career, back in the dark ages, when every insurance company used almost exactly the same policy wording. So there was no coverage comparison issue. It was simply an issue of comparing simple things like premiums, deductibles, that type of thing, limits of coverage. Now every single policy wording for every carrier is different from each other, with the exception of automobile. In Ontario, the government has mandated what the automobile policy has to read, has to cover, And so the policy wording is the same. Some of the other coverages in automobile are different, but automobile is really a smaller piece of our pie because our big issues are the property schedule and the whole liability piece. So when we got our proposals in, the process was just to read through them and compare page by page and sometimes item by item and even clause by clause to determine where the value was. The two proposals are from very, very strong players. I've had in my insurance career goes back 35 years, and I've had extensive involvement with both Cowan's and JLT. They represent very strong insurance companies because Cowan is not an insurance company. They're like a broker. They put together an insurance program, and the risk is shared by several insurance companies in their stable. JLT does the same. All of those companies are rated by AM Best as being at least A- or better. So they're all solid, well-known financial players. And the process that we went through and that I was engaged to perform largely was to go through and do the comparison to determine which was stronger. And in some cases, the Cowan proposal was stronger, and in some cases, the JLT proposal was stronger. But I think it really arrived at probably 6 or 7 items that are the key issues to determine the value. Would that be helpful to go through some of those?
I think so, that'd be good, yep.
Well, you stop me if I get too detailed, because some of this is a little bit technical, but the issue, first of all, of course, was the issue of premium, and Mr. White has reviewed what the premium difference was. The issues that were of interest to me were issues of coverage, and the JLT proposal insured liability limits at 25 million, whereas Cowan's maintained the 20 million you had before. Cowan's will give us 25 million if you want that for an additional premium, as I've indicated, of $3,300. The JLT proposal is unique on the liability side in that they include something called punitive damages. Punitive damages are not commonly awarded by Canadian courts, but sometimes they are. And punitive damages are typically a situation where the defendant has been found to be particularly egregious in their conduct towards another party. I don't think there's been a municipality in Canada against which punitives have been awarded, but they are requested in many, many statements of claim now, and they're certainly more common than they were. Cowan's excludes them. They will defend them if there's a claim for something within the scope of the policy. And the JLT proposal, not only do they defend them, but they will cover punitives if such are awarded. There is coverage for abuse, and abuse is always a very distasteful thing to talk about, but a reality of our day and age. The problem with abuse claims often is that when you find out about them, they're very old. They're often situations, the ones that I've been involved in, and I have been involved in a few, typically involved children who didn't make a claim until they reached at least the age of majority and sometimes well beyond. So the problem is that there may be a passage of 10 or 15 or 20 or more years. The coverage with Cowan's, in my opinion, is superior there because not only does the policy limit, the full policy limit apply, but there's no aggregate. And aggregate means how many claims you can have in a given policy period. So an occurrence is a single claim, how much is paid out, and aggregate is the combination of several claims within that policy period. Cowan's has the full limit with no aggregate. JLT's coverage is not as extensive. It's $250,000 per claim, $500,000 in any one policy period. And the other issue is because it's on a claims-made policy, this gets a little bit complicated, but let me just explain it this way if I can. The example I often use is if I have a windshield claim on my car today, or damage to my car, and my policy expires on February 15th, and I get the damage fixed and I submit the bill at the end of February, the insurance policy I had in place now is the one that will pay. We all understand that concept. And even if I have a new insurance policy February 15th, that policy will not be involved because the claim was triggered by the incident happening on February the 3rd. A claims-made policy, and almost all abuse coverages are written on a claims-made policy. The coverage is triggered not by when the incident happened, but when you became aware of it or should have become aware of it. And so, the issue, if we ever were to change insurance companies on a claims-made policy, and claims-made is abuse, errors and omissions, and environmental impairment. If you change one of those policies, it's important that if there's any claim that you know, or any situation which may give rise to a claim, that gets reported prior to the policy lapsing. Because when the policy lapses, it's then dead unless the claim has been reported. So on that score, the Cowan policy is broader. On the environmental impairment liability, you can see that the limits are higher on the JLT policy. The deductible is the same. The JLT policy carries a clause in it that excludes underground tanks that aren't declared. We don't think we have underground tanks, so that may not be an issue. In some of my experience, we've encountered situations where underground tanks were owned or on owned property and were not known about from a long time ago. If that causes an environmental claim, the JLT policy would not respond, the Cowan policy would. However, there's a significant piece where the JLT policy is stronger, in my opinion, in addition to the fact that they have higher liability limits and have punitive damages coverages. They also, on their property policy, cover for earthquake and flood, which is rising water. Significant deductibles are involved, but that's a coverage that's in their policy and in their pricing and not in the Cowan policy. Cowans could quote that for us. It would be an additional premium, and they've not advised what that premium would be. The JLT program also gave us future pricing guarantees, and as you'd expect, there are conditions attached to that. It's a 3-year guarantee on the liability and a 2-year guarantee on the property. The most significant condition is an ongoing strong loss ratio. Loss ratio simply is how much is taken in premium versus how much is paid out in claims. And the final item that I put there is that under the Cowan policy, there's no coverage for pollution to your own property unless the peril insured against is one that's covered by the policy. So if I happen to run my car into one of your fuel tanks, because vehicle impact is covered, the resulting pollution would be covered. If you come to work tomorrow and find that somebody's dropped off a PCB-laden transformer on your property because they don't know how to get rid of it, it then becomes your responsibility. And the Cowan policy would give you no coverage for that. The JLT policy gives you $100,000. There are a series of other, what I would consider, and in reviewing with Mr. White, we, I think, agreed that they were much less significant in scope. There are probably literally hundreds and hundreds of differences between the two coverages. I've tried to itemize those that I thought were, although less significant, were at least coverage differences. But the primary issues are the ones listed in the chart that we've just reviewed. And because they're both strong insurance programs, I've had experience with both, because they're represented by strong insurance companies with an A- or better financial rating, I would be confident in your coverage being placed with either one. In our scoring system, the scoring system that we had declared in our RFP, the JLT program came out slightly ahead of the Cowan program.
Questions? Deputy Mayor Tess.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Bridge, on the minor ones, some of them are described as being silent. What does that mean?
That's a great question, Councillor Fisk. In a liability policy, the typical policy wording is, we will cover the municipality against compensatory losses for all issues imposed by a court of law or by reasons of liability. That's the insuring agreement. So unless there's an exclusion that eliminates something, it's assumed to be covered. So for example, If there's no exclusion about liquor license liability, then it's covered. And so the insuring agreement is very broad, it's reduced by a series of exclusions, and if it's silent on the issue, the assumption is that it's covered. On a property policy, the property insuring agreement says we will insure against all risks of physical loss or damage to buildings, equipment, and other assets. Again, there's a series of exclusions or definitions to narrow or reduce the coverage. If something's not addressed, then it's considered covered if it's not excluded. So usually on a broad policy like this, silent, depending on the context, but silence can be a positive thing because it's covered. Sometimes, if it's an issue where the courts have made a fuzzy definition, silence may not particularly be helpful. But in the cases here that we're looking at, was there one that you'd like commentary
No,
on specifically?
I just didn't understand what the term meant.
Sure.
And they are minor, but I just needed an explanation, really.
Well, for example, under the GL means general liability. You'll notice under medical payments, it's silent. In that situation, I would not consider that to be a positive, because medical payment simply means payments that you may make for medical situations for which you are not legally liable. A liability policy is intended to respond when you are legally liable. But if I go out here and through my own clumsiness fall on your stairs, and I say, there's no responsibility on your part, but I have to get crutches, and you decide to pay that to help me out, you're not admitting liability. The policy, the question is, would the policy respond? Under the JLT policy, there's coverage for medical payments up to $50,000 without any reason of liability. The Cowan policy is silent on that, so I would anticipate that they would not pick that up.
Just further on that same question, one that struck me was under E&O liability, where Cowan was silent on sexual misconduct, the other one excluded it. So I'm guessing because they're silent, it's probably excluded as well?
I think actually, Councillor Colwell, that the situation there, that's a great question. The E&O liability wording is so broad that my interpretation would be because they're silent on it, they're not excluding it. Typically, abuse coverage comes back under the general liability. But there could be situations where under an errors and omissions claim, an allegation could be made against management or council of the municipality saying, you should have known this was going on. You should have asked questions. You didn't do it, therefore we're holding you responsible. As I read the policies, the JLT policy is specifically excluding that type of coverage on an errors and omissions basis. It picks it up under the abuse coverage for general liability, but because the Cowan policy is silent and because the insuring agreement is so broad, I think it would be covered. But it's a good question because the issue of silence is different depending on the context and the specific policy involved.
We could be, with this silence, we could be opening ourselves up unless, it's almost like a trust. Unless we can ask them directly, what do you mean by your silence? I think that's, to me, that's the only way you're gonna really find out. You're assuming, assumption isn't what we need. We've gotta assume, we can't just assume that silence means that they're gonna cover us, is what you're telling us. So therefore, we should be talking to the coverage to say, what do you mean by your silence?
And I've had in my career, Councillor Elliott, I've probably had that conversation 1,000 times, and underwriters will say, well, it depends on the circumstances. Or my interpretation, and frankly, the ultimate interpretation that really matters is not the broker's interpretation, or the underwriter's interpretation, or even a lawyer's interpretation. Because when the rubber hits the road, the interpretation that matters is what do the courts say. And you know as well as I do that sometimes a court of appeal will reverse what the first court has said. So those are great questions, and those are questions that could be directed towards the company as part of this discussion, always with the caveat that until a court decides, we really don't know. and in my career, I've seen several situations where underwriters will say, it was not our intention to cover that, and the courts will say, too bad, this is what the wording is, and in our interpretation, that wording extends to cover that particular incident. So it's not as black and white as any of us would like.
So if we're not sure, we should be asking.
We should ask, sure.
Before we make any decision.
Yes.
Another question, Mr. Mayor? Okay. I see by your point system, 60 points for financial and all the rest are 10, so one company could score really well on important matters and lose out because financially the other one's better.
It's possible, and we recognized going in that was a risk. My advice to the town on this issue was, I knew the players who would respond, because we had put in our criteria that they had to be able to cover all the parts of the puzzle. I knew that there were only 3 players that would respond. And I had told Mr. White going in that that's what we'll get. The most we'll get is 3, we may get less than that. The 2 that we did get respond, in my opinion, are the 2 of the best players. But all 3 players are strong. They're very carefully niched in this. So my expectation, and because I have dealt with all 3, my expectation was that the coverage issue would be very similar, that the ability to adjudicate claims would be very similar. And so, although they scored differently in terms of the proposed merits piece, and we can go through some of that if you're interested as to how we scored that, I believe that the coverages and the way that they address the services would be fairly similar. And many municipalities have been insured with 2, or in some cases, all 3 of the players. And they have opinions as to how they were treated and how easily they were serviced, et cetera, or how well they were serviced. But in many ways, they're fairly similar because they're competing all the time.
The reason I'm looking at that, because in fact, if one of the insurers wouldn't give us the coverage we needed when we needed it, because we didn't study on the silence of what's happening, and so in fact, after one coverage or one claim, we could lose everything that we gained on the financial end of it. It's hard. It's where we gain 30,000, we may lose 30,000 because we're not getting a claim where we
Or
would
lose
have.
100,000 because we didn't have the claim.
That's right, and that's why I'm saying I don't know whether that 60 points is valid in the fact that how do you judge that?
Sure,
Other
that's a
than
very
seeing
wise
numbers.
observation.
Yeah.
Because the astute person is saying, I wouldn't even buy insurance if I knew nothing was gonna happen. But I don't know what's gonna happen, and I don't know where my risk is, so all I can do is attempt to measure my risk in terms of, given your experience, you know where your risk probably is, given your reading and you're hearing from other municipalities, you know where the risk is probably gonna be. But you're right, for example, if we were to run into that errors and omissions situation on sexual misconduct, where the one policy outright excludes it, we may be wishing, wow, if we had known this, we would have picked that policy even though it was more expensive.
That's right.
But the reality is we don't. So all we can do is prudently look forward and try and measure what is the greatest chance of risk and how best do we,
How you're best serviced.
how do we best protect
for the
against that?
dollars that you put forward.
But if we knew the future,
Yeah.
we would maybe choose differently.
Yeah, then we could guess that we're not gonna get sued or whatever it is.
But that's a very astute comment, because
Yeah.
that's the nature of this protection. We're buying it at the front end, and we don't know what we're going to need.
That's always been my concern about insurance.
Sure.
Is to know what you're getting for your dollar. And you've done very well. The breakdown's superb. You know, it's given me I've been involved in council for many years, been involved in insurance policy for many years, and this is well broke down, and it gives me a pretty good understanding of where we're going forward with this. But I think a lot of questions gotta be asked yet.
Yes,
That's what
sure.
my point is.
One
Okay.
thing, for example, that gives me a bit of indigestion is under the general liability, liquor liability, the JLT policy has a very short clause indicating that injury to an unborn child due to liquor liability issues is not covered by the policy. Now, that's a pretty remote situation, but if next week we find out that were to happen, we would be better covered by the one policy and not covered at all by the other policy.
Somebody walking out of a situation falls with a baby in their arms.
Or it's the unborn child, so I'm concerned
Good.
about somebody maybe at a situation where the municipality, the town gets drawn in, where there's been, somebody who's been overserved and involved subsequently in a car accident,
Right.
and an unborn child is injured.
Right.
Those are the kinds of things, if you let your imagination go, you
I
can
know,
think of those situations.
But there aren't imaginations when it comes to insurance and people suing for whatever they can sue for. I mean,
That's right.
Over the years, I've seen that.
And at the end of the day, we can't pick and choose coverage for coverage. We have to pick option A or option B, recognizing which one gives us the best value and the broadest coverage. And that's how we try to devise our scoring system, recognizing that any system is imperfect because we don't know what the future brings.
I remember we got sued once for a hockey player being banged against the boards and the screw popped out and scratched him, and he got a couple of stitches, and they sued us for money, and I believe they won. But it was time, so that's the kind of thing that I'm just. Terry?
Yeah, I have a couple more questions. One is the third BFL or whatever that didn't submit an RFP. Any idea of why they weren't interested?
I could speculate. Your account is a very attractive account because you have very few claims. You have low severity and you have low frequency. So that's the kind of account that gets underwriters salivating. They want that. The player that did not respond is the smallest of the three. They've had some difficulty with markets. The whole issue for an insurance underwriter is really a very careful balance, because if I charge you too much, I'm not gonna have any business. Nobody's gonna go with me. If I charge you too little, I'm not gonna have any insurance companies because they're paying out more than they're making in premium. So that balance is critical. And of course, none of these players know going in what your claims history will be for the coming year. So they're basing it on their own experience. I suspect that the reason that the other player did not submit a proposal is that they questioned on an account with such excellent claim service how competitive they'd be. Because they asked for additional information, we supplied much of it, we addressed other issues that they raised, and then we were a little surprised to find that they hadn't submitted.
And my other question, and it doesn't pertain to either or here, it's just a general insurance question. Quite often, there's a lawsuit that becomes established, and for whatever reason, it's decided to settle out of court, and there's an expense, usually to the municipality, that even though they weren't found guilty or negligent or whatever, they still have to belly up to the bar and pay the bill. Is there any way of that doesn't affect your rating when and if you're looking at insurance in the future?
It always does affect your rating, and that's why insurance underwriters are so keen on the issue of mitigating the effect of joint and several liability. Because towns like yours, Deputy Mayor Fisk, are considered to have deep pockets.
Mm-hmm.
You may not think you got deep pockets, but you're perceived that way because lawyers know that you have deep insurance limits. And so there are situations that you've read of with other towns, and you may have encountered it yourself, where there's not a single thing you would have done differently. But you're getting joined in the action because it was your road, or it was your rink, or it was your facility. And if you can be found even 1% responsible by a sympathetic judge, you will then have to pay whatever shortfall exists by the other player's inability to pay. And the legal system from 35 or 40 years ago was much more maybe like our parents would have wanted, where people were treated according to what they had done right or wrong. It was the rationale that whatever a prudent person would or would not have done, that set the standard. Some judicial observers would say today that it's a lot more about trying to have people who incur injury or claims paid by whatever process can pay them, and that the losses are ultimately borne by a whole series of policyholders. That's probably a discussion for another day. But as long as that kind of judicial dynamic is at place, towns and municipalities, other government players will be perceived as having deep pockets, and the risk is that you will get drawn in on those situations because of the things that you own and are responsible for.
Could I just make one more comment? Sorry to drag this on, but when we started into this process some time ago, there was some concern that we were wasting our money by having someone like you come and explain insurance to us. And I took some comfort from your opening remark that you had basically hundreds of policies and statements that you had to review between and compare between the two bidders. And there was no way that we as lay people could have even begun that process without someone like yourself. So I thank you for that. And I said at the time, and I still say, that the money that we spent was money well spent to get this type of information.
In one of my first conversations with Mr. White, I said that I'm old-fashioned enough to want him to say that at the end of the process, and if he still said that at the end of the process, then it would have been a worthwhile venture. So I'm trusting that you still think that as we complete this process. There's a lot of paper that gets submitted. That was JLT's proposal, and that was Cowan's proposal, and a lot of it was double-sided. So there was a lot of reading and a lot of comparison, a lot of analysis.
Well, I thank you for that.
I'm just gonna wrap it up maybe in just a couple of quick ones, and Deputy Mayor Fisk hit one of them I was gonna talk about, which is, I think it's money well spent that we have somebody like yourself, because I know when we asked staff, and they said, we're not experts in this, and it's hard to compare apples to apples, and I think everybody on this council wanted to make sure we at least got that. And as we see, even trying to do that, there's still differences, and we have to kind of adjust and figure out what's good and what's bad and what we need, whatever. So that's one of the points. The other thing, if these 10, 10, 10, and 10, do we have a breakdown of how they each scored without the, take out the financial at this point in time? Do we have that?
Bridget, in the report, it's more subjective.
Okay.
But I will say this, I think the financial part is not as subjective. I think it was 1 point for each 1,000 or 2,000 difference. So I think JLT scored about 5 or 6 points better that way on the financial side, so.
Well, of course, yeah.
So whereas JLT got 60 on the financial side, Cowan would have got 55 or 54 or something like that. So then there was the other 40 points that were up for grabs and were subjective. So what ended up in my view, and I don't want to really announce the points, but
okay.
I was very, very close on the two in terms of overall points, and Mr. Bushy fair to say would be a little bit more on a little bit higher for JLT than I. So,
Although there were situations in my scoring, item by item, where Cowan's did score higher.
yeah, me too. And that was probably in the experience and on the additional services. And we did quite a lot of work trying to look into that, and should say to you that there are a lot of additional services that in risk management and other areas that Cowan does provide, that if you need them from JLT, they may be an extra for that. And also the experience of the local brokers is different too.
Okay.
So I think that would be where Cowan scored higher, whereas on the price and on the 3-year price guarantee, that tipped some of those other indicators in favor.
And I guess that was my last question on the 3-year price guarantee. Where's your thoughts, Randy, going forward? I mean, we're hearing all kinds of scary things about our own personal insurance, let alone municipal insurance, because we're going to have to pay for these ice storms, we have to pay for the floods and all the other stuff. Do you think that there's going to be a fairly good increase in insurances going the next couple of years?
From everything that we're reading, it's already begun to happen. Insurance companies in Canada have to run a fiscal year that's the calendar year, so they just
Right.
completed their fiscal year. And the basic concept of insurance is that the losses of the few are paid for by the premiums of the many.
Right.
Last year was pretty pretty significant in terms of claims, property claims. The Calgary flooding was a big one. The Toronto flooding didn't have as much press, but the dollars attached to it were larger. And the train derailment at Lac-Mégantic in Quebec was a significant insurance loss, as you can imagine. So people in Ontario, outside of the GTA, may say it's not fair that we have to pay, but that's basically the concept. So I had indicated to Mr. White that my prediction was that your premium, had you done nothing, would have been up this year. Probably based on your claims history, you would have had a lower increase. I would have guessed somewhere in the range of 4 to 8%. The fact that you've had, even with your incumbent player, a relatively small increase, and our property values were much higher. That's another part of it, is that probably about $10,000 or $11,000 in premium is just to handle the property values we used. I think that this was the year to go. Whether the choice was made to move the account or not, it was very strategic to go at this time for that reason. But many players in all sectors of the economy, very good claims history, will be seeing 4 to 8% increases this year.
And I guess my follow-up question on that, we're not affected for 3 years unless our claims go up, right?
Right. There are other conditions as well, Mayor Bridge, but they're the ones that would be obvious. If you were to add an additional ice rink, for example, they would adjust for that.
Sure.
If your population were to explode by 15 or 20% suddenly, they would want to adjust for that. But all things being equal, they're saying if your claims ratio, claims and reserves are kept under 40%, then you can expect to pay the same rate as you did this year.
But just to clarify on that, if our premium is $250,000, 40% of that is 100,000?
What happens is it actually relates to the specific policy. So I think the liability policy, and I'm going from memory on this, if the liability policy, for example, is 120,000, then they're going to take a look at the 40% of the 120, and if your claims are less than that, then you should expect to pay 120 again next year.
So 48,000 in claims on a liability with reserves and so forth, one claim could quickly exceed that depending on the claim.
Could. So the risk runs both ways, because sure, we could have a claim the first day of the policy and it sets a reserve at $250,000 and we know that's gonna blow us out of the water. That's the risk we're running. But had we not had that guarantee, the risk to us is very much the same. We're still gonna pay more if our claims are outstripping our premiums.
Right, gotcha.
Just quickly. So we're talking 48,000, which would be a drop in a bucket. The kid banging his arm against the boards and suing us for cutting his arm and whatever, when I said that happens. Mr. White, do you know any idea what we average out on claims and liability for a year?
Bet our expert, pretty good idea, but.
Yeah, we went through the claims. Your claims history is excellent.
Okay.
In terms of frequency, that means how many you have. You're well below average on that, Councillor Elliott. And in terms of severity, we have one issue that you're aware of that goes back a long time, that was very, very difficult one to protect against because of the circumstances. But your severity is very low. If I were a betting man, this is an account that I would bet on that you'll stay under your 40%. That's been your history.
Okay, and sorry to carry this on, but there are questions that I don't understand. We have outstanding claims, people trying to sue us for claims and such like. If we changed insurance company, who would pick that up?
Well, that's what I was commenting on
just
earlier. So most of your claims are on occurrence-based policies, and the policy that was in place when the incident happened will carry it right
That's
through
right.
till the end, even if
Okay,
it's 10 or
thanks.
12 years.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions? Very thorough.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fran.
Thank you so much.
Good.
Sorry. Put that.
Need a motion?
Mayor Bridge, I know there's been some discussion here. I just want to clarify in the recommendation, it says local broker, should refer to the company name rather than the Wiley Insurance.
Mr.
in the
Mayor,
recommendation.
the
Could I
recommendation.
make a motion, we defer this to the next council meeting? When we have, it's a large claim, or like it's $250,000 we're looking at approximately. If we could defer this to the next council meeting, when we have more councilors in place?
Got a seconder first? Ron's motion to defer it to the next council meeting. We have to do it by the next council
Yes.
meeting.
Defer,
Won't necessarily have to be council.
But it might not, depending on when we do that.
well, depending on whether we go on the
That's the
Nobody
motion
wants to
on the
second
floor.
that motion?
Mayor Bridge, if we I think what we're saying, if we reschedule the meeting from Tuesday to Monday, we would have one more council. Here's all we have. So,
It's a big decision to make, huh? I think we have some more, me personally, I believe I've got more. I need more information. I'd like to do some more investigation. I believe, but, also kind of agrees with that.
Does that recommendation include meeting with the insurance?
I would like to do so.
under the RFP, I believe we allowed the option that if council wished to meet with the companies, that could happen. If the town wanted to meet, I shouldn't say council,
Yeah.
so, rather than having them come to the next council meeting, what I would suggest to you is that you strike a group to have an interview both firms. And I would like Mr. Bushy to be there. I
For
think
sure,
that would be very helpful, and the treasurer and myself, and then maybe a couple or three off council to interview. That was an option that we didn't take up in the RFP, and if that's what council wants to happen between now and the next meeting, then
I think there's,
that could
Yeah.
have to form part of the motion, I think.
for me personally, a lot of, this clarified an awful lot for me, but there's also unclarified a lot. There was, if that's a word, that I have some questions about, especially those silent. I'd like to find out exactly what we're covered and what we're not covered with.
You may not get that answer, but
But
at least
we can
let-
ask the
them,
question.
Yeah.
And then
So
I
think-
feel more comfortable with
Yeah.
going ahead, if I could do that,
So,
so.
did you want to add what Bill just
I
said
would,
to the-
I would make a motion that we strike a committee to, interview the two companies,
Before the next council.
separately. And, I would also ask we defer it to, the next council meeting. And I believe there's gonna be a motion forward to move the council meeting to the Monday night, so that we have, at least one more
We're
council.
gonna check into that to make sure that we
Sure.
have an extra council. Anybody want to second that? All in favor of that motion? Opposed? There you go. Okay, that's what we're doing then.
Okay, so
Okay, thanks.
I think I understand the direction.
Well, I think this council wants to get this right as best possible.
I think so.
This is a big decision. Okay. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, did you want to,
So I'd just carry on with the agenda, Mayor Bridge, because those can
we haven't
happen
got too much
after.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And we have, Mandy's gonna do a,
Mayor Bridge, this
Oh,
is for me.
yeah, this for you,
Uh,
Bill.
We had another offer to purchase for lands in the Palmerston Industrial Park. What Anleen is putting up there is a bit of a diagram so you can see where these two properties sit. This is the map you had at the last meeting that showed the areas that are being rezoned. But the future Tim Hortons is shown at the corner of Minto Road and Wellington Road 123. So you can see that preliminary site plan at the corner and how that might lay out on that site. In between there is the property that Tim Hortons has purchased that will be the shared entrance. That entrance will be shared between this proposed gas bar, which is another gas bar for Minto, and the Tim Hortons. So that gas bar preliminary plan is shown to the left of that entrance, so you can see where that's been labeled on there. And they would both share that one entrance off the county road. The sewer and water to that gas bar would be built from the cul-de-sac south to the gas bar. Similarly, it would be coming down there for Tim Hortons as well. So the offer has been in trust from a gentleman named Sarah Jit and Mahat. The proposed gas bar is shown on the site plan. They are purchasing the property for $25,000. They're buying part one, and they're buying a right-of-way over the middle property, as I mentioned. In addition, in their agreement of purchase and sale, they will be paying a third of the cost of building that entrance and a third of the cost of maintaining that shared entrance with Tim Hortons. So that was included in there as well. They are meeting the normal development covenants with this 15% construction coverage and a building permit being issued within 6 months and construction underway within 1 year. The final site plan, those are very, very preliminary that you're seeing in both cases. What we've done since these offers are being finalized at the same time is put A and B together to talk about grading and drainage. And we have our consultant here who's designing the road in behind, and he was kind enough to prepare and provide some basic AutoCAD information for both those firms as well. So they're all working off the same base plan, and everything, if we do things right, will all tie together and look proper and work properly. So we're recommending, and there is a bylaw in the regular session that authorizes the mayor and I to execute all agreements necessary to conclude a transaction on that property. And again, the map 1 that I put in there should be excluded. It's at the back of an old report, and I keep putting the same map in there.
Yeah, so disregard that map.
Please disregard that, but that's our recommendation.
Questions? Councilor
Just
Caldwell.
one, and it is in the report, you didn't mention it verbally, but the two sides are working together as far as the truck traffic is concerned?
Yes, that will be confirmed in the detailed site plan for both, but the agreement of purchase and sale for the gas bar states that they will cooperate in terms of solving truck traffic issues related to that corner. So, and Tim Hortons is well aware of it as well. So, that will be a condition of getting that entrance from the county.
Anything else? Councilor Elliott.
Full of questions tonight. Sorry. Parking. If the trucks are gonna make that turn, which is okay to come into the gas station and get gas or diesel, and obviously they're gonna make a move to go to Tim Hortons, is there a place, is there an agreement in, okay with the, or is it all right with the gas bar if they park in their areas, because it doesn't appear that there's enough room in Tim Hortons, or is there?
Right. Again, that'll all be finalized with you in the final site plan, but what the gas bar is saying is that if trucks come in that shared entrance and turn left, they're happy to allow them to cross the property in behind and onto the Tim Hortons property. So, and they've done the calculations on turning radiuses, and they believe that that will fit. So the vehicles could come on the property, turn left, go around the gas bar, and theoretically park on the vacant property in between the two use.
Okay.
The
Thanks.
issue will be who pays for developing that parking lot.
That's right.
Recommendation. Council for Town Minto receives the January 28, 2014 report from the CEO clerk regarding the proposed sale of Savit Mahat in a trust to the Palmerston Industrial Park for the purpose of the gas bar for $25,000. The council considers bylaws in regular session authorizing the mayor and the CEO clerk to sign any of the documents related to the closing of this transaction. All in favor? Carried. Yeah, oh,
Okay. You got them?
yeah, I think Ron and Mary Lou are just kind of making
That was
turns.
pretty quick. I was looking the other way when I.
That's right, that's right. I was way ahead of you on that though.
Rich, my last report relates to the Center Wellington Fire Department cost analysis that, and the fire chief is here as well if he wanted to come out. I prepared this report with his support, and we can go through it with you if you wish in detail, but there was a media report on the cost analysis comparing the various fire departments. We became aware of it on January 23rd in our budget meeting, so there was some comment that we wanted to make sure that the correct information was in that report, and I just wanted to let you know that we have put that in here, and this report was sent to Center Wellington CAO as well, so he did see this last week, so he is said that he had no problem with this report being brought forward for council.
Hey, Chris, do you want to speak to the report? Basically, there's some wrong numbers, so that's why we wanted.
Correct, this is just clarifying the numbers that were included in that report to show what the accurate figures are. Just the added part is, and I believe it says it in there, that it's very hard, the way everybody does different budgeting and different operating costs and calculations, to figure out what the exact number is and compare apples to apples with municipality. Part of our numbers in there, it does fund the 25-year truck plan, which I do believe is unique to a lot of departments. You know, some don't have reserve funding, some do have, and we're lucky enough to have it. So that's just one example of something that's hard to compare budget to budget, operating to operating. So I believe this, it corrects what they were after, but there is still so many circumstances that are not listed in here.
Any questions from the council?
Was a correction, asked of the Wellington Advertiser in regards to the article in the newspaper?
Not to my knowledge, but it's not really the Wellington Advertiser's fault. It's they took the report that was sent to their to Center Wellington Council and just reproduced the report. So it's not.
No, I'm not saying
That-
it's their fault. I'm
No,
just
yeah.
saying would they be willing to?
I'm not sure how Center Wellington's going to handle it. I know Bill's spoken to their CAO, and I know our mayor's spoken to their mayor. So
Oh, okay.
I've let the powers higher up than me deal with that issue. So
I think today we just wanted to make sure that the proper amount got out, that, you know, so hopefully the press is here and they can put it in. And I haven't heard a lot of comments, but I think we get a pretty good bang for our buck at under $100 per person for fire protection. With all the stuff that the 3 fire departments do with the, again, the tanker program, which means if you're out, I believe, is it 8 kilometers, Chris? If you're 8
7 or
kilometers
8
within the town or whatever, you can get a savings up to a couple $100,000 on your insurance because, you know, they have that tanker program that they've worked hard to get. And as Chris said, it's hard to compare, and figures that they had were from a government report that had us at 6,200 people. Well, that wasn't right, but we certainly have a great fire department, and we're at 85 firemen.
yeah, and that's the biggest fact is what we are able to do with, we're the largest fire department in the county due to amalgamation,
Yeah.
as we all know, and we are the smallest tax base, so it's strike one and strike
So-
two, so I like to think that we keep it as manageable as possible, and we offer pretty good service, I hope, so.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get that message out, but thanks. Any other?
Just, I would like, if I may, I'd just like to say our firefighters don't do it for the money.
No, no.
So, they do it for the love of their community and to support their fellow men, and I appreciate that. And that does help in our budget an awful lot, and we certainly don't look at that to try, but that's, I do appreciate what they do for the dollar they get.
I'll make sure I pass that on, so, thank you.
Chris? And we have a recommendations received. I move in a second on that. Second where it says. Your turn. Councilor Caldwell, all in favor? Okay, good. Terry? Can't believe anybody's building anything in this weather.
I know, actually, it's been a really great January for stat-wise compared to the weather out there. So, yeah, issued 6 permits worth just a touch over $250,000. So things at this point are looking good. So should be an excellent year, I'm thinking.
And I think we talked about it, department heads, there's quite a bit in the
Yep.
mill.
Yep, there's a lot of stuff in the background that's getting all sorted out. So it should be, yeah.
When spring comes, it should be a good spring.
She should be busy. I told the wife already I won't be going on vacation this summer. I won't have time. So.
Okay, good, good, that's good.
So.
Any questions for, motion to receive, Councilor Elliott, Councilor Fisk, all in favor? Carried.
Perfect. Thanks.
Good job.
I'm gonna turn this over to, Councilor Caldwell.
And the Finance Committee has 2 items on the agenda tonight, this afternoon, and they're both approval of accounts, one for January 13th and one for the 23rd. So I'll just ask Treasurer Duff to have any explanations of larger amounts.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Caldwell. For the first one, that's the one that's the 342,000. Some of the highlights are engineering bill, actually regarding our financial plan, coming up with the levels of service, which Triton just presented part of it this afternoon. Snow removal of about $11,000 on the one. Some work on Jay's Variety in Palmerston, the parking lot, about $19,000 in excavating. Another $13,000 for some water meter installation work that was done late in the period. Some work at the Harrison Arena, electrical work of about $11,000, and some other stuff to do with our water towers and updating the operations manuals for about $10,000. The highlights of that one. Do you want to
May
wrap
we
them
do them both
together?
at
or-
once?
I think we can do
Okay.
both at once.
Okay, so the next one is 394,000, and we have $5,000 in ice storm expenses on that one. And we have some capital purchase for the fire department, about $15,000 in equipment, and I think it was mentioned before, we put a little a roof dormer over the doorway at the Clifford Hall to help with icicles and build up in that too. Public Works, one of them, we're gonna actually recover a lot, the sill drain at the south end of Palmerston there. We roughly had to pay North Perth $100,000, and we'll be billing back all but about 3,000 or 4,000 or so in drainage assessments. Amazingly, we have one bill for December sand and salt, $53,000 just for that.
There goes our
And-
40,000 we put in.
Yeah, I think we blew that one in a month, yeah. So I think those are the highlights. Some tools for the water department of 9,000. Those are the highlights.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Yes. Councillor Elliott.
How does that work? We pay them 100,000 and they pay us back, why?
We're the banker for that. I guess that was
Oh,
said
that's
at
how-
one of the, yeah, one of the site meetings, yeah,
So we receive money from elsewhere and then?
Yeah, we'll assess
As
all
it
the
comes back
property
in.
owners that are affected in our jurisdiction.
No, why do we become the banker and not they?
We're very nice. I was a little surprised to see that too. I
Yes.
think that was in there. Perhaps CEO.
I think that's
has-
under the Drainage Act, and there, as the billing municipality, we have certain rights if people don't pay. That,
And-
but
But I thought North Perth would.
they were the ones that initiated
Initiated,
it,
yes.
but if they sent out the bills and someone in Minto didn't pay, they don't have the same right to, ability to collect the money
I see.
as
Yeah.
we do.
Thank
We
you.
can add it to the
So
taxes.
they probably have their own run there too.
Yeah,
that they are.
yeah. I get it now.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Smith?
Gord, I'm just wondering if you could give us a ballpark figure as to what our condition of our snow budget is for 2014?
I can give you some. There's not a lot to, but I thought I could maybe give you some context anyway. Within the last 10 days, I've spent some time along with Public Works and CAO working on our ODRAP application. So we put in for about 398,000, but we really have 4 events. We have the April 2013 ice storm, the July windstorm, the December 22nd ice storm, and the January blizzard. So we've tried to separate it and yet put it all together as well. And one of the things that I sent down to the ministry was just kind of an overall, I looked at 2012, which is totally done, and we budgeted for snow removal, salt and sand, and tree cutting, a total of 454,000, and we spent 410. Great. So a year ago, in the operating budget, we bumped the 454 to 475,000. With what I have in the books right now, it's 841. So that gives you a context. We're up 366,000. Now, I've chatted with Jackie, who's doing the payables. So right now, I have about $55,000 in 2014, and this is only the 3rd of February, of $54,000. I have another $32,000 to add to that for bills we've received. There's going to be bills we haven't received that they've done in the past, and there's no machine time for that. So again, I can't give you an accurate answer, but it's gonna be much bigger than it was in the same period a year ago, and this is why we've asked for some help and all that. It's quite a.
So do you anticipate us changing our budget that we've spent?
Well, I have tried to look at where we are in 2013, and if you remember, I did an August 2013 review of where we are. So we'd already had the April ice storm, and I think we already knew that we weren't getting, our chances of a reimbursement weren't that high too. So Public Works greatly, much to our, I guess, our engineers' regret, cut back on things like surface treatment and that are necessary. So the overall Public Works, I don't think it's gonna be as bad as it might have been if we had continued to, you know, spend on snow removal and spend on the surface treatment. So, problem is, it's not gonna give us, I'm thinking hardly anything to carry into 2014. So that's why, that's the big uncertainty. And I hope they make a decision, hopefully a positive one on some kind of reimbursement for us too, that'll help.
Our last letter, just to maybe through you, our last letter stated the reason they didn't give us any money the first time was it was just at 3% of our overall budget. Wasn't around there?
Yes,
Yeah.
for April.
And now we're looking at
I think we're at 9 or 10.
9 to 10. So if that was the criteria, which we don't know, it's always a moving criteria, but certainly I would hope that we'd be looked at the same light as Toronto and all of Mississauga and all those people that are asking, because they're not any worse off technically on their overall
Yes.
percentage of budget than we are. But again, it makes it really tough for us, because we can't pass 9 to 10% onto property taxes onto the taxpayer.
For sure,
And
yeah.
I give the fact that I think it was a couple $100,000 we didn't do road works, which if we
Yeah.
didn't have done, if we wouldn't have done that, we would have been in big trouble. We would have been looking at probably a large tax increase. So some foresight there, but the problem is that's road work, as we heard from our engineer today,
Yeah.
that we just put over to the future. It has to get done eventually.
That's
So
right, yeah.
we're hoping for some help from the higher tiers.
Yeah, the costs are phenomenal, and as you know, the price of fuel and diesel and all that, whether it's our own vehicles or our subcontractors, like, it's just flowing right through to us, so.
Anyways,
Yep.
Is there any other questions? Then the recommendation is the council of the town of Minto receives the treasurer's reports dated January 13th and January 23rd, 2014, regarding approval of accounts, and approves the town of Minto accounts by department for January 2014. Mayor Bridge and Councillor Elliott, all in favor?
Thank you.
And I pass the chair back to you.
other additional items, I think you got mine now, but Terry, you had one?
I guess it's changed somewhat. I thought we might be passing the insurance recommendation, but I just wanted to ask Gord, if we do end up saving $20,000, does that go right to the bottom of our budget as far as a saving, or how?
So I'll say, all things being equal, yes, because when the department heads and we were all working together back in November, when we were working on the operating budget, we kind of assumed that costs would be relatively constant. So basically all we have is like a rounding error for insurance costs in the budget that we have now. If we're able to cut it by 20 to 25,000, that would work out to about 0.5% of, I'll say, more flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
We can't hardly pin them down, because we don't know what our year ends yet, but that,
Sure.
you're right. Councillor Elliott, I believe, did you have one? No, you have one? Mary Lou?
Okay, it's been mentioned before, but the Chamber of Commerce annual meeting is tonight at 7 p.m. at the Harrison train station, and all are welcome, is the first item. And the second item is, I just wanted to make a suggestion that our next council meeting, instead of Tuesday the 18th, if council would consider Monday the 17th, and it would just allow one additional councillor to attend our meetings.
I would so make that motion.
Or second motion? Did
Second
you make a
motion, if that's, you're making a motion.
All in favor? Okay. Thanks very much. Make sure we get that out to everybody.
I'm pretty sure I sent that out.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say.
People don't show up. Well, we have delegations here, so, not delegations, we have public hearings, so.